On today's Try to Finish Something, I've got to wrap up a project I started in the last episode, my Carbonized Bounty office door. For me, if it's a Star Wars inspired project, I've got to come up with a backstory. It's what helps me feel connected to that project. I need to know who this bounty hunter is and how this office door actually works as a carbon freezing unit. My oldest daughter was giving me a hard time because she was saying, why is it every time I do a nerd project does it have to be Star Wars related? And I've got nothing against other nerd franchises. I love the Marvel movies. I don't have a prop that speaks to me yet. In fact, I was going to be a comic book artist. That's what I always thought I wanted to do. And Star Trek, I have nothing against Star Trek. I was in an episode of Star Trek. Back when my morning show partner Jeff and I used to do morning radio, I was in an episode of Star Trek Voyager. I was the bead salesman trying to sell beads to Janeway, the pleasure-seeking bead salesman. Hello. My daughter wants me to work on a project with her this summer to do something from Five Nights at Freddy's Springtrap. I've seen the pictures of this, and this is something I can get into. But today's project, I've got to come up with a backstory on who this bounty is and why he's here and how this door works. And I'm going to do that and finish this project on today's Try to Finish Something. So the door is back off the hinges and it's time to bring it back outside for some more construction. So if you plan better, you could avoid this step. I need to clear the area that I taped off from paint of glue. I should have taped it off before gluing. Cutting the edge with a razor blade and then scraping off the glue. Once cleared, I cut some strips of wood that will become my rusty metal frame for my carbonite freezing chamber. The nice thing about making something that is Star Wars inspired for a change is you get to be a little more creative in the execution. For me, like I said before, I have to have the full story of what the prop is used for and why it's here and why it looks the way it does. It's, I don't know, just the way my brain works. There's this guy, Kelly Stern, in one of my mini nerd groups who will just build things just because it's raining outside with no rhyme or reason and no plans on how to use what he's building. And I envy that. You know, I need to do a collaboration project with him. Anyway, for me, I have to have a backstory and the object has to then tell that story. This freezing chamber is cobbled together from things this Mandalorian has collected. It barely works, but it does the job. Exposed electronics, rusty metal. This is the look that I'm going for in the end. I am gluing the frame and using brad nails to hold it in place. I am adding some details for points of interest just to have it not look like a simple box frame. I'm also painting a few panels silver to be accent pieces and drilling holes. I'm going to use as much real hardware as possible, and yes, I am using Allen screws. Now, to base it all in a flat black. It's okay if the spray paint gets a little on the frozen bounty, I'll fix that when I'm weathering. Added my random accent piece and playing around with ideas on what to add and trying to think what that object would do. I don't like the red disc, which by the way is a smoke alarm mount. It will live to be a prop on something else another day. This black box I made on the Glowforge using a really cool program called Box-O-Matic, letting you make a box of any size. This will house my batteries and the switch to the few accent lights that I'm going to have. This tubing will be the channel for the wires that will go to the lighted panel, and I've got big plans for this lid. More on that later. Now, the electronic board. This is the control board from when I fixed my dishwasher in a previous episode. I told you I'd find a use for it. I'm drilling a few holes into the board to add a few LEDs for interest. I'll just super glue them in place and mount that to the door, again using real hardware. And I will feed the wires to my power box through that tube. I'm going to use some wire keepers to nail this to the door so that it looks more makeshift and cobbled together and less factory installed. Wire all that to the power and add some greeblies with a purpose. This is the thumbprint recognition to free your bounty, some little screen and board I pulled out of an old camcorder. Now, back to the lid of this power box. I bought this greebly from the Smugglers room. I bought this from Brian and Carissa before I even had a channel and before I was ever going to build anything. I just appreciated what it was that they did and wanted to support their channel. And this whole build is inspired by this little piece. And I really appreciate the work that goes into what they do each and every week. I'm going to put a piece of plumbing down here with that matching yellow color. This is the drain for the carbon when thawing that frozen prisoner. Now, I brought the door back inside and hung it. Time for weathering, doing the layers with the bottommost color first. I'm applying rub and buff to my metal frame edges. Then what I'm going to do is take orange, brown, and yellow paint with a sponge, and I'm going to simulate rust on all of the metal edges of the frame. Then I'm going to go down here and dirty and weather the electronics and my power box. I'm also going to do some paint drips where the rust has run as the metal is being exposed to the carbon fluids and to the drain point down here. The top is another electric panel, and it has a fill tube on the left, and on the other side, it's a Seagate hard drive case weathered and has the other end of the carbon fill hose. I'm adding a lot of rust drips and weathering the chamber to tell my story. Many layers sneaking up on the paint job, and now, as I click on the power, let me show you the final carbon freezing chamber and tell you its story.
This guy can't really say hi at the moment, so I'll just tell you a little bit about him. Currently, he is deep in a carbon freeze, and this isn't some fancy Cloud City carbon freeze. This is a ragtag, cobbled-together freeze chamber on my ship. Is he comfortable? Probably not. He's wanted for crimes against the Empire. His last known whereabouts was on the planet Endor, and he was presumed dead, killed in the explosion. But if you're alive, can't hide forever, and I'm going to find you. And before you think my allegiance is with the Empire, it's not. If the credits are good and the bounty is right, you are coming with me. And I can take you in warm, or I can take you in cold.
Carbon freezing chamber door completely finished. If you liked the video, please subscribe and tell a friend. And as always, if you didn't, just keep it to yourself. And we'll see you next time as we try to finish something. Thank you again to the Smugglers Room for the inspiration.